two vampire stories, and a dragon. Hey everybody, welcome to D3 Reads. It's Eric, and I am so excited. It is now officially Halloween season, and it is time to start reading some horror books. And we're going to jump right into it today. So the way we're going to approach this is I've added a number of books to my Halloween TBR, and I want to go over those with you first. I'm really excited to share those with you. I've been looking forward to these books for months now. But if you'd rather go into the book recommendations, the ones I've already read, there's going to be a link in the description that will let you go straight to that. So check out those. If you're looking for scary books, I promise you they're all excellent. But maybe you'll circle back later to check out the TBR portion of the discussion here kicking off now. First on the list, and I mentioned this before, is Joe Hill's King's Sorrow, coming out in just a couple of weeks here. I think October 21st. This book is Joe Hill's first published book in, I think, a decade. But the premise of the story sounds great. The main character is someone who's a college student up in Maine, of course. Joe Hill, like his dad, Stephen King, loves New England, loves the New England Northeast area. And this guy has a girlfriend who I guess is involved with some seedy people. They nab the guy, or they force the protagonist to steal some books from the library of the university that he attends. Now, that's obviously kind of the setup of something underhanded and probably paranormal. But the main character goes to his friends to try to get some help, and they decide that rather than do that, they're going to fight back and get a special tome made out of, I think, human skin that's wrapped in human skin that's sequestered somewhere in that library, and summon a dragon. And I believe that's who King Sorrow refers to. Yes, a dragon. And they're going to use this dragon to fight back against these gangsters or criminals or who have you. However, dragons are notoriously not very friendly, and they're hard to control, and so this kicks off a long story. This book is over 800 pages long. I've said before, I'm kind of a slow reader. I will not have this book done by the time Halloween comes around. So what I'm going to try to do is read enough of it to be able to give you a sense of the storyline by the end of the month, so I can have my final Halloween wrap up before Halloween comes along. So this book, I'm a Joe Hill fan, and I've read a couple of his books in the past. Horns and Heart-Shaped Box are two really good ones if you're looking for ghost stories. Horns isn't a ghost story, but it's still something. I think that was his very first published book. But the Heart-Shaped Box one, ghost story, classic type ghost story in there, and very much worth your time. So if you haven't read any Joe Hill, this first one, this one coming up, King Sorrow, again with a length of 800 pages plus, it might not be good for your first venture into Joe Hill territory, but his earlier works definitely are worth taking a look at. Because I'm waiting on Joe Hill, I decided to add another Joe Hill book to my Halloween TBR. And the reason why is this. I've told many a times on this channel that one of my favorite types of horror stories is the vampire story. And I even have a whole video about what I think are some of the best vampire books out there. And I will put a link here for you to that if you haven't seen it. I have very strict rules on what makes a good vampire story, and I explain it more thoroughly in that other video. But Joe Hill back in 2013 published a book called Nosferatu. It's like a license plate, Nosferatu. And I never read it. And as I was putting together my Halloween TBR, I thought, wow, this is fantastic because I love vampire stories, and here is the son of Stephen King writing what seems to be a vampire story. And I went ahead and I got this book. It's on my Kindle Fire, and I started reading. I couldn't help it. I'm still finishing up a couple of fantasy novels, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to get a sense of what it was, and man, this thing starts off strong. It sucked me right in, and so I forced myself to put it down so I can focus on getting done with Joe Abercrombie's The Devils, and The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. But I am going to be going strong into Nosferatu here, and as soon as I can. Now, if you haven't heard of this book, the story is somewhat out there. The main character, I believe, is trying to save her son from this killer who we're introduced to early on in the book, who at least the setup is that he's either a vampire or he uses some kind of vampire kind of imagery or symbology in his murders. I don't know a whole lot about the plot, except that, wow, like I say, the first chapter just kind of just drags you into this horrific world that you can see that the main characters are going to have the work cut out for them. What I really like about horror, the types of horror stories that often appeal to me. Now, I like a wide variety, but what you'll see in a number of the books I'm be recommending to you is it takes people who are often regular folks, and they have to confront some kind of paranormal evil, and the good authors are the ones that make it believable, that you can kind of put yourself into those seats, into the seat of the character, and you can be like, okay, I think I think that might be the way that I would respond, or a realistic response from somebody. I get a little turned off from stories where the protagonist tends to just kind of fit right in, unless that's the world setting, of course. So that's neither here nor there. So the first two books were Joe Hill stories. The next one, and I have mentioned this before, is The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, Stephen Graham Jones, I was introduced to him through The Only Good Indians, which I reviewed a couple of months ago. I just think Stephen Graham Jones has got a very fresh, kind of a unique writing style, and it works so well with his horror stories. And then I found out, so I read Only Good Indians, which was published, I think, in 2020. And then I found out that in 2025, he came out with a vampire tale. Wow, man, I had to jump at that. So that's what I did. Now, this book, I very, very purposefully avoided any kind of serious book reviews or retellings, because I went into The Only Good Indians completely ignorant of what the plot of the book was. I just wanted to be surprised about everything about it. Now, as a book reviewer, I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but there are times when I wanted to do it because I had heard about Stephen Graham Jones, never read any of his stuff, and I was just like, okay, let's see where he takes me, and I loved the experience. So I heard that The Buffalo Hunter was a vampire tale. I hear it's historical fiction of a sort, and that this vampire is somehow seeking vengeance for something that happened in the American Midwest or American West. So I decided to avoid any kind of reviews or any kind of recap of what the story is. So I can't tell you what's waiting for me on the other side of this, except that, just like with Nosferatu, I went ahead and read the first couple of chapters, and I'm really enjoying what I saw. It's doing a more of a kind of a soft draw into, whereas Nosferatu laid right into the evil and the supernatural. The Buffalo Hunter, the first few pages, basically is inviting you into a mystery for the main characters. So I am enjoying this one as well. So 2 vampire stories and a dragon. That's what I'm looking at right now with the with my Halloween TBR. I'm a slow reader. I would love to add more. And so what I'm going to do is, in order to maximize my enjoyment and my Halloween reading, I am going to also include into my TBR some short stories. Now, in the next section of this, where I talk about recommendations, I've got a couple short stories I'm going to recommend. And one of them is by Algernon Blackwood. I have a collection of his called Algernon Blackwood Horror Stories. And inside of it, it's broken up into various themes. And one of the themes is ghostly visitations. And so I've read a couple of those stories, but there's a few that I haven't. So I am going to start reading when in between some of these books, when I want kind of a break or just smaller tidbits or morsels of horror, I'm going to be reading that. I've heard of a couple of these. I've read The Empty House and The Occupant of the Room. So I'm going to go into The Damned and The Decoy, I think, and I'll let you know how those turn out. But Algernon Blackwood, he is one of the kind of the grandfathers or founding fathers of cosmic horror. He's often mentioned as someone who is inspired by and inspired H.P. Lovecraft. So he has definitely got some solid cred when it comes to horror writing, and his ghostly stories are pretty enjoyable. So now you're looking for some scary books, and I'm going to recommend these books I have talked about in various forms through all these videos. I talk a lot of horror. Matter of fact, I've got a whole playlist on various horror recommendations. We talk vampires, we talk ghosts, we talk cosmic horror, gothic horror, zombies. We've got it. I think we've touched on almost all kinds of subgenres with horror. So some of these books I've talked about already, but if you're looking for something, maybe you haven't read one of these books, I guarantee you they're frightening and they have different levels of psychological engagement. They'll pull you in. None of these are going to be what I would think of as jump scare kind of books. So the first one was a treat for me because I had heard about it when I was in the service back in the late 2000s, but I never got a chance to read it. When I started this booktube channel and I started collecting books for my best of vampire list, I came across The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, and this book was just, I think it's almost the perfect Halloween read, because let me tell you, it's a vampire story. In fact, if you might recognize the picture because it's used by Hollywood a lot, as well as documentaries and that kind of thing talking about vampirism. It's specifically about Count Dracula. And I was fascinated. How can you do a new vampire story or a vampire book about Dracula, and will it be any good? And this book is just an engaging, smart read. What it does is it adds a new chapter kind of to the Dracula story, but it takes a character, as I mentioned earlier, who is completely unassociated with any kind of paranormal or anything unusual, and they get introduced into this world. And of course, the first thing you're going to think of is this is nuts. The whole story starts with the introduction of a mysterious book and symbols, and you're pulled into a mystery that quickly becomes sinister and starts invoking, the paranormal. And you're wondering, is this going to go all the way down that road, or is there something, more than meets the eye here? But the book this will not, I think, haunt your dreams, but it will keep you fully engaged. And like I say, as a spooky read, it really, really does scratch that itch. This book was really popular. I think it was New York Times bestseller, and I'm glad I finally got my hands on it. And I highly recommend it if you're looking for a smart, engaging read, but it's not going to be the one, like I say, that keeps you up at night. Now, if you want one that keeps you up at night, then you might want to consider Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Now, I'm trying to stay away from just vampire books here, but you can't not mention Stephen King's, if you're talking vampires at all, you can't not mention Salem's Lot. I've talked about it at length in a number of different videos, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. It was published in 1975, so it is the 50th anniversary since it was published. And as I understand it, there may even be an anniversary publishing of it with Joe Hill providing an intro to it. So that's kind of cool. I might have to go find that and get another copy of this. Salem's Lot it's a classic horror. I think it's probably, if not the best, one of the top vampire stories out there, because there you have all the elements you need. The main character is a writer named Ben Mears, who used to live in Jerusalem's Lot in Maine, a fictional story where Salem's Lot takes place. And Ben returns to Salem's Lot because he wants to write a story, because he had this horrible experience in this haunted house, and he's writing a book about this house when he was a child is when this happened. So he's coming back 25 years later to write a book about this house, but he finds out that this mysterious European businessman named Kurt Barlow has purchased the house, and it turns out that this is the start of a very vicious evil infection of the town. Mysteriously, people start dying and disappearing, and then you have the outbreak of this dark vampire story. I just loved it. The book was so well done. There are things here and there that I didn't care for, but I don't think there's such thing as a perfect book. But Salem's Lot is one that I recommend. In all my, if you're reading vampires or horror in general, that's what you got to go for. And next is another classic that a lot of folks have probably heard of, but maybe not have read the book. It is 1971's The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. This book is a classic, and the story obviously is well known because of the hit movie that was based off of it. But if your only experience with The Exorcist is the movie, I highly recommend that you go and read the book. I've told this story before. I put a short out there, but I got my hands on this book when I was in college, and you see, I was studying for this midterm exam, and I didn't want to do it. I had a big chance of failing anyway, I think, and I laid down on my bed to study all day. It was early Sunday morning. My test was on Monday, and I was just going to pull it all day and all nighter. Those of you in college, you probably can relate. But what happened was, as I started to study, I don't even remember what the subject was, economics maybe. I glanced up, and on my roommate's shelf, he had a copy of The Exorcist. So I went over there, and I just thought, oh, I've seen the movie. I wonder if the book's any good. So I told myself, well, before I get started Sunday morning, I'm going to go and I'm going to just read the first couple of pages just to get a sense of what that's like, because I was just intrigued since, again, I was familiar with the movie. So I started reading the first couple of pages, and I kid you not, the next thing I know, it is midnight, a little bit thereafter. I had read the whole day, and I'd closed the book. I'd finished it all in like 12, 13 hours. As fast as I've ever read a book. I got so drawn in, and it is nightmare fuel. It is a fantastic book. It is pure horror. It tells the story of, well, it starts off the story with a Jesuit priest who, this is very much like the movie, where he's on an archaeological dig, and somehow he comes across this statue of this Assyrian demon, Assyrian god named Pazuzu, and he gets this premonition that something is coming, that there's a confrontation between good and evil that's coming up. And then it switches over to the United States, where we meet the young girl named Reagan and her mother, and she winds up being the target of this demonic force, this possession that results in the priest coming to there to do the exorcism, and it's part of a larger struggle between good and evil. The book, again, fantastic, but the book is a scary read. It's a good book, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is looking for something really scary. That if you're talking about possibly losing sleep, The Exorcist is that book. Finally, I said at the beginning of the video that I was going to recommend some short stories, because sometimes you just want a sampling. You want a sample platter of horror. Well, I got two short story sources I want to recommend to you. One of them is a book I've talked about last year, which is Stephen King's You Like It Darker. I know a lot of Stephen King and Joe Hill here. It's just they're deep into the darkness here, right? But Stephen King's You Like It Darker is a collection of short stories and novellas, and I'm not even going to say go read all of them, though I would recommend it. Most of them I enjoyed immensely, but that collection produced three of my favorite Stephen King stories of all time. I'm not going to go into the details of each of them, just a couple of notes. But if you're looking for short stories, Some Like It Darker, I think it's published in 2024. Actually, there's a novella in the beginning, close to the beginning, called Danny Kaufman's Bad Dream. That one, I didn't know what I was getting into with that, but it it drew me in, and I was just getting so entwined or just so enthralled with Danny's struggle through this supernatural thing that happens to him, these dreams that this dream that he had that causes the whole story to unfold. It was just fascinating. And so this story, it's classic King, but it's and I just enjoyed it so much. I can't go, because it's a short story. You can't go into too much without revealing things, but a really good book. But it wasn't the scariest story in the book. The That might be Rattlesnakes, I think. Rattlesnakes is a story, and this is trippy to me because I didn't realize it until I started reading it, and then something triggered, and I looked it up, and sure enough, this is actually a sequel of sorts to Cujo. And the main character in Rattlesnakes is the dad of the child and the ex-husband of the mother who were attacked in Cujo, who were trapped in that car. And this story has him and his wife have long divorced, and he's down in Florida, and he winds up having this ghostly encounter on this kind of retirement place. He's borrowing a friend's summer home or what have you, and he gets pulled into this supernatural horror story, and it was just fascinating. Now, there's some parts of it I think some folks might have a problem with, simply because it sounds like it could be goofy, but I think I'm in tune with where Stephen King was taking, and I thought it was the creepiness that he intended. But I really enjoyed the story. It's kind of brutal in parts, kind of sweet in parts. So very much a good novella, and it made me again think that this collection was definitely one of the better Stephen King books I've read recently, but one of my favorite stories overall. And finally is The Dreamers. And the thing I like about The Dreamers is, and this is all I'm going to say about it, is that it is Stephen King's kind of foray or homage to cosmic horror. So if you're a cosmic horror fan, The Dreamers, which the title of that is based off an H.P. Lovecraft story that gets brought up in Stephen King's story. This is a story that you're going to be interested in. So very much kind of an overlapping of the worlds of H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King. So what's not to like about that? And finally, as far as short story recommendations, and this one you might be able to find free online, as I mentioned Algernon Blackwood and his short stories. And some of these I think are available over Project Gutenberg, and maybe definitely some of the libraries that you can check out Blackwood's work. But The Occupant of the Room is a ghost story that Blackwood wrote early 20th century, and it was really legitimately creepy. Again, you can't go into too many details without giving it away, but the setup, I think you can get a sense of where you're going. The main character is a teacher or a professor in Europe, and he decides spur of the moment he's going to go on vacation into this kind of winter chalet up in Switzerland, I believe. And but because it was kind of a sudden notice, and they don't have, or kind of a sudden decision, he's by himself, and they didn't have the internet, obviously. He just shows up, and he finds out that there's absolutely no room in the one inn that's in this small picturesque town. And he is so upset because he doesn't know what he's going to do. It's not like you can grab an Uber, right? He has to find a place to stay. And well, it turns out that as he's trying to work something out, that the hotel says, well, there is one room, but it's been booked to somebody else. But here's the thing, this person went off a few days ago to climb the mountain, and she never came back. We're not sure where she is. So you could stay there until she comes back, right? Well, what's the implication? The main character realizes right away that he's staying in the room of someone who could very well be dead, because somebody who goes off to climb dangerous mountains in the winter and they don't come back and they don't report in might very well be dead. And so now he's kind of having this issue with, okay, I'm sleeping in potentially a dead person's room surrounded by a dead person's things. And that creates this ghost kind of encounter that is really kind of cool. Short stories by Algernon Blackwood. If you can probably find them, like I said, online in any number of places, or you could do like I did and buy a collection. But I recommend his works. The Algernon Blackwood Horror Stories book that I have was a collection that I got at Books A Million, and they have a number of such collections of classic authors, so you might want to try that as well. But that's it, guys. That's my Halloween TBR, books I've read, books I am reading. Let me know what you're reading, if you've got any good suggestions for horror books for Halloween. And have a great read, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.